Julie here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and I'm going to try to record this episode beginning in Saturn hour and amp it up with a lot of Denebalgadi. The moon is conjoining Ketu, and it's a Saturn hour, and Saturn is in the sixth house in Pisces. Jupiter is procyonic, almost, still in that T square, and the ascendant is ruled by Mars, midheaven ruled by the Sun. So I'm gonna bring my Deneb Algadi materia for this because this episode consists of the joke that got real. And what do I mean by that? A little bit of it's vetiver rose. That's the time where I had no compatible like Deneb Algadi oils, but there was a Deneb Algadi election. So I went for like what I have, and I'm like, well, vetiver is good for the nervous system. Rose because I was also emphasizing on the Taurus section later. Um, mm, that's that whatever. So I hope I managed to get this one right. Um, Saturn in relationships. Now this is going to be more challenging for people born at night than people born at day. But the place where another person's Saturn meets our chart is the place where we're going to have first of all something that takes time to deal with. Okay, so and the joke, by the way, went like this: somebody's Saturn enters somebody's fifth house. They bring them karma for all their casual relationships, or what they do for fun. Um, that's I don't make the rules. Um, so yeah, right now Saturn is in the sixth house of work, basically. But Saturn synastries are given basically places where um, we are going to set a trajectory that is both going to be corrective to what we've done, kind of like karma, what is the accumulation of actions in our life uh, at a certain field. It's also our Saturn, okay, um, and it's going to probably, even when we separate from that relationship, it's going to probably take some time. And if we find challenge to separate from a relationship, I got a question about karmic relationships. Um, Saturn is where I would look for to see, first where I would look for to see where is that karma, okay? Now, of course, the outer planets absolutely operate according to that. Saturn is kind of intermediary between a personal planet and an outer planet. So let's say somebody's Saturn falls in your first house. That means that there is a cumulative karma to your path in life and your body. For example, I was working on my feet and curating my feet and so on, and tending to my feet basically brought on the Saturns in my first house, which were issues regarding the stuff I've been dealing with in my path and in my body, and also kind of incarnated me going for a lot of the goals and dreams that I have and tending to what was undermining them. Um, so Saturn in the first house might mean that that person matures a person around um, basically their looks or their life path. And the benefit from that is that one begins to tend to that which they haven't been tending to. Okay, also in regarding to their health. Saturn, of course, in rare cases, Saturn in the first house can be death or incarceration or, okay, those things. Um, but in most cases, that's not going to be about that. Um, Saturn in the second house. So Saturn coming to somebody's second house is kind of like the you've been served transit. Okay, actually Saturn Aries will be my second house, and the you've been served would be to the people that own the real estate that they try to traffic me in, because that's where my business documents are. Okay, and it would be about time where I would be supposed to have due diligence. I've already informed the authorities of that, which would force the authorities to look into that, because they can't do anything about my due diligence when my documents are at the place that they've tried to traffic me, while being targeted individual for like no touch torture and stuff like that. So they're gonna have to deal with their bureaucratic mess themselves, and and that's because I've prepared the ground when Saturn was in my first house to let all the authorities know that that's the case, and to actively, and this is where Saturn is important. Okay, Saturn coming to the second house of someone is about a maturation over values, standards, skill. Um, it's considered the house of Hades. So there's let's say anything that is for me, I was like the victim of stuff. So for me, karma might mean that, oh, those guys get caught. So okay, and it's ruled by Mars. So I'm actually a night chart. So this would be a Saturn that's ruled by my malefic of sect, which is a 22 retrograde Mars in the ninth house. I don't know. People will have wished that they have treated me better if they don't start to buy this transit, is what I see. But for other people, it might be a different case. And this is where they better clean up their act, because this is the house of taking action, or basically standing up to our values. And this is exactly the house where people get the you've been served in the sense that they better clean up their act. Now, you've been served doesn't mean like, oh my God, you need to pay taxes, but if you don't, you need to understand what would be your strategy. Like, if it's no taxation without representation, are you going to go for civil disobedience? Are you going to go for counter litigation? Are you going to go for class lawsuit against your country? I mean, it's done in Netherlands right now, pertaining to Arno van Klaas, who was one of the attorneys and is now a political prisoner. Um, so, and this is important because the you've been served, which is, and this one in the eighth house is the susceptible you've been served type of transit. But this is basically where just paying your taxes is not going to solve the problem. Saturn is karma, okay? And I cannot stress that enough. Okay, I cannot stress that enough. Um, Saturn, even with political prisoners, if people did like class lawsuits against COVID, but where were they in the Rolodex, then they're going to get into this incarceration because they haven't, hey, recording, setting boundaries to my mom. I guess that's another karma. Um, and because they haven't tended to the no-touch torture that is difficult to prove at court, and now they're dealing with that. And I'm actually in the process of trying to assist people to bring my academic research into basically evidence that assists both political prisoners, judges under incarceration that are not corrupt, and targeted individuals across the world. So basically, from the political prisoner perspective, they would need to deal with the targeted individual being brought to court and actually having the targeting stopped and the classified project funding instead of their targeting their compensation. Um, and from my perspective, running into the political prisoners is 12th house remediation, when the hidden gift is being able to translate the research I was targeted for into a legal procedure that stands where the evidence stands in court, which is basically what my academic research was about. Um, Not only that, billions of other things, but also that. Another thing that can happen with the second house is food, skill. This is where this is where somebody's Saturn can bring the karma of now you have to develop that skill, or now you have to apply that skill um, that that one needs to apply. In fact, when my ruler of the when the ruler of the fourth that was active in the second was activated by eclipses, it was the time for me to begin to apply the academic knowledge that I had um, in praxis. Not an easy transit at all, because going into applied mode is going from engineering school to actually building something. Um, More stuff can be food, what one eats, and how that affects them. So that can be karma, like around okay, the basically if the food that they eat is healthy or not. Um, that can also affect a second house matters, and of course income. So Saturn can limit the income, but also create a stream of income that stands the test of time. Saturn rules rocks and minerals, so one can even develop the skill of being a gold digger, which means actually digging gold in the soil. and, and that's probably another joke that is going to become true. Um, Somebody Saturn coming into a third house. So I've had that. Um, I've had that with a colleague who is astrologer and herbalist and so on. Um, so that is a Saturn that would affect. First of all, this is a relationship that can be more like the mature sibling. Okay, they can be like the mature sibling, and having a friend that holds you accountable. Okay, and that is, for example, for me, that was when I was going through my Pluto square, and I was very caught up in being the victim of trauma, and then I met a person that was um, 14, 15 years younger than me, and I'm like, oh wait a second, I talk about this topic about this person. I'm in my 40s. That person is just beginning their lives, and at that time they also had a high rank in an astrology organization, and we had to tend to the problem of sexual boundary violation there. But basically, it would be the problem of ritual abuse, infiltrating an astrology organization, and that would be the person that would check up on me. Okay, that would be the person if I haven't been seen around in a while, they would be the person that would check up on me. And that's kind of like the older sibling. Even if they're younger, they bring a certain like karma, or karma to a certain trajectory. And again, karma can be both sided. Okay, so it can be that that you, the native, serve as a maturation process. Let's say somebody just became a head or one of the head of an organization. I've been the person that has gone taken a break from academia because of the infiltration of ritual abuse there, and then I can be a person that kind of like gives the maturation aspect too, from the house, or from the perspective of the house, to the person, but also they would be kind of like the maturation aspect, okay, for me, and, and that's basically like that sibling that um, it is not going to Like that's the sibling you're going to have an actual argument with. That's the sibling, an actual constructive conversation, an actual incarnation of something that can change a certain trajectory. Third house is also the house of our neighbors, our so it's very common to have for people that just move out of the home. It's not implausible that they would have a neighbor, even if they don't know that, that would have a Saturn in their third house. Okay, because they're just learning how to have good neighboring relationships with people when they live outside of their home. And this is also business, so that can be something like a business karma, how to run a business. Saturn in the third house can be actually building a business that is both registered at the right authorities with the right paperwork, runs itself, okay, the management, the structure of the business, the infrastructure. Okay, Saturn to the third house is the infrastructure to create a business that will stand the test of time. It's also house of communication, so maturation around communication, um, how to deliver a message without creating enemies, and uh, 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 yeah, ooh, okay. I have Saturn in Mark Rutte's third house, and he been weffing, maybe with Gates, maybe not. I mean, I don't judge his, but um, ever since I ran into that chart, I've been jabbing Mark. And there is even that meme about the evolution of war from stone to a syringe. It's friendly fire, but it does hold him accountable because it's kind of like I'm not a hater, but I create a lot of the problems. I don't create a lot of the problems or remediate the stuff, but I'm like, well, temper tantrums and threatening everybody's life, including mine, is not going to actually solve the problem. I know that's what works in the death camps, but this is exactly that's the jab, and also it takes time. Um, yes, and so Saturn through the fourth house of someone. Saturn through the fourth house can be dealing with the karma of manifestation of actual housing, tending to the upbringing. Um, when I know a person that had Saturn in my fourth house, and I had to deal with the curses Saturn that exist on real estate, but also the manifestation of housing, and it was quite literally the many things that I was talking about regarding like my dream house. Later, when they bought a property, they divorced and bought a property, and they would have like a garden of roses in all type of colors and so on. Um, and that was basically running into the incarnation of having a house, having to deal with the real estate issues that I have been postponing, dealing with curses on the real estate, but also curses on the upbringing, correcting relationships with the parents, and again, correcting might sometimes mean taking time, Saturn, and space. Um, okay, because let's say some of the families are in satanic cults and stuff like that. We're like, how can you do a family gathering? um, but this is definitely also where if something is wrong with someone's housing and upbringing, Saturn is going to accentuate on that and require to take the steps to correct that or correct the effect that it has um, on the person. Um, more fourth house things. That can be elementary education. For some children that go to elementary school, that can be some coming from their teachers, because that's the adult figure in the school. But also for those that teach foundation courses, like foundation of astrology, foundation of any field. Saturn to the fourth house might be where they prepare that course, or where they actually practice teaching, or where, if they are teachers for a long time, um, that would be the place where they have to stand up, to take accountability, and make sure that they are doing things in a correct manner, or in a mature. Okay, there's a maturation to Saturn. Saturn going to the fifth house, and this is where that joke began. And fifth house is what we do for fun, children, casual affairs. Um, okay, it's the lovers stage of dating, for example, but also children. Okay, the first child is associated with the fifth house, and Saturn going to somebody's fifth house might mean that they have to mature in regarding all of these things. Okay, for me, for example, I had a colleague that my Saturn was in their fifth house. They became a father, um, while Saturn was in their partner's fifth house. So that was that was definitely a time to be mature around the stuff to do with children. Uh, and funnily enough, I was expressing my own inner child in my podcasts, and um, as well, they brought Saturn to my seventh house, which is house of partners and open enemies, and I actually have the same degree Saturn as my mom. Which, so Saturn to the fifth house. That's a time to clean up one's acting regarding to everything they do for fun, to the lover that they are, okay, to their relationship with their kids, okay, if they can have they can even have a child that is born with that. If let's say they have Sun in the fifth house, they could absolutely have a child that's born um, with a Saturn that's like maturing the parent, um, which happens. I mean, that is particularly for parents that went through negligence, um, and the child can be bringing that Saturn to prevent excessive patterns of the parentified child. And so, yeah, heavy topics. Saturn brings heavy topics to the fifth. But if they have, um, Saturn rules rocks and minerals, so this can absolutely be people that begin to develop a hobby that's related to Saturn in some way, or they can take better care of their hair and skin and have that be. On the one hand, they can have Saturn's affair be more fun. On the other hand, they have a responsibility regarding something that is supposed to be fun. So it's very compatible of, let's say, becoming a parent, or making a casual relationship committed, or separating. But in any case, it's going to take time, because Saturn is kind of like the due diligence of the era. Um, Saturn in the sixth house. So Saturn in the sixth house brings the karma to both the pets that the person has, okay, and the um, not only pets, but also the service, their daily routine, their health, how they take care of their physical health, um, any open enemies that they have. So Saturn, while it can denote of a long-term open enemy, that would require a person to really be mature to deal with that open enemy. That can also mean that they adopt a pet together, or that they have to take care of a pet. Um, Saturn in the sixth house means that the person has to make sure that their job is compatible with their physical health. Okay, because Saturn might make a person physically ill. If, for example, Israel has Saturn in my sixth house, and I cannot work in a job where I would get ill, underpaid, abused, because Saturn would immediately make me sick. It would immediately make me, even when I had to leave during the Me Too time, I got physically sick. Okay, so Saturn would show in that way. It would not let me kind of harlot myself when it comes to work for the need to have a secure income. And um, and Saturn is something that takes time to correct. So there's actually quite a protective quality as well to this Saturn. Um, and this is important because Saturn showed us, perhaps because Israel has Saturn in my sixth house, I'm way more aware than other people that Saturn is not about hard work. It's about actually doing the right things at the right time for the right duration. Otherwise, it's not working, and the money is also not yielding. I actually got into debt in 2008 by working two jobs. Okay, they were the wrong jobs. They were not paying enough. They were the best jobs in the sector I could get without a degree, but they were not paying enough. And I had to beg for money to have the ticket to the bus from the bus station that covered the ticket to the airport city, working for Shimkotek Ludan, which is basically a company that is also a weapon company. Okay, I wasn't working for the weapon sector. I was working for the public transportation sector. But I had to beg people for money for the bus ticket in 2008, 2009, 2010. And I was not working, like I was just going to meet people and didn't know how to result. Freaking high tech company. I was not smoking. I was not drinking. I don't like drugs. Okay. Like I'm not into weed and stuff like that. Definitely not anything more than that. And there really were no big expenses that could have taken my money. That was just the working sector in Israel in 2008 to 2010, before the 10th revolution of social justice. So this is a Saturn that takes time um, to correct a certain wrongs, and that definitely brings. Okay, I have it natally, so like I don't have it natally. I was born in Israel, so I would have it in Israel. Um, but yeah, Saturn into the seventh house. Somebody's Saturn into the seventh house brings a reality check to both people around relationships. Um, and this is where, for example, my colleague Saturn entering my seventh house, I had someone that I thought was my best friend, and they really didn't like the energy of that person. So whether they were right or wrong, because that person also been in a personality cult, so but whether they were right or wrong, um, they they basically were a part of something that exposed something that someone I considered my best friend was getting himself into, and um, okay, that is a crime against humanity. Like my best friend was getting himself into, not best friend at all in that regard. Like I saw him as my best friend, was getting himself into doing crimes against humanity, and targeting me, um, and that definitely gave a reality check to. And for those that, how come you didn't notice? Why would I notice? That person stood up, well, from what I saw, stood up with me when I was doing the Me Too case. That person saw that the Me Too case was affecting my health. That person was the person I was laughing at during, harshest time in my life. I considered him my best friend. I was not seeing that he would get into that type of dumbfuckery, and it's very likely because of torture that he went through. Not that he's, but still, the actions have to be stopped. Um, to the actions that would target me and would target people, innocent people, or to try to traffic or to sacrifice people, those actions would have to be brought into full stop. And under no guise of nothing could that be in any way legit. So that definitely was a reality check to who are my partners, allies, and enemies. Um, and in retrospective, okay, my parent has Saturn in the seventh house, and they would always want cooperation when I was way too young to be a cooperator. So they had also a reality check of, wait a second, I need to rest. I'm not a person that would, get up in the morning and just be all energetic or whatnot. And they had a reality check to what they think is cooperation. Um, and so Saturn would have in the seventh house is a reality check to both regarding a mature connections with, yes, cooperation, but also expectations that can you see that it's Saturn even in Virgo? Expectations that are realistic, okay, that are realistic and allow people to be within the connection. Um, so so that would also bring into awareness things that happen in my seventh house. And when I was a child, I thought, well, is my mother like an obstacle from me having a relationship? And in retrospective, I see what's on with the ritual abuse satanic cults, and I'm like, no, like that. Every relationship, parental relationship, would have things to fix, and that's an understatement. But that was definitely keeping me from um, kind of hanging with the wrong people for a while. um, and it would look like that would be excess control from the parent, because there are really a lot of dumb fuckery out there. But then they would have these weird things that would go off their own radar, where I had to be the Saturn figure there, um, because they would be blind to certain things, and that was working in that way of a dual way. Saturn in the eighth house. Okay, so Saturn to someone's eighth house is exactly the you've been served, but it also deals with all types of traumas, and it can also mean the occult. Saturn in the eighth house, people, while they might be people that bring curses to someone's life, they might also be the people that um, have a reality check on that person, in the sense that, hey, you have been having these traumas or these delays in your life because of a curse that's being put on you. Okay? And it's always with Saturn tending to one's nails, tending to one's teeth, tending to one's skin, hair, that would be exposing any curses, Saturn, that would be placed upon a person, or any attempts to make delays or limitations. They would become evident now that the person is tending to Saturn. Saturn in the eighth house might be incarnating birth, okay, or um, or delaying birth, and it may require setting boundaries to people we have shared resources with, um, and basically bringing in the implications of those type of traumas, or things that were swiped under the rug with the eighth house. So it has a very taxation, money, debt type of implication, but also cult. For example, Saturn is natally in the 1800 chart of Netherlands, um, and now Pluto is going to go over this Saturn uh, in the coming decade. which means that everything that Netherlands swept under the rug regarding anything Saturn, okay, the occult practices to do with the finances, to do with the um, uh, all those eight house things, they're going to be addressed. Okay, Pluto is a megalithic you've been served on a nation's chart. And it's going to take some 20 years. Um, I know there are some people like, why couldn't I meet you earlier? I was like, because I'm your Saturn return transit. And um, or part of it. Saturn in the ninth house. So Saturn in the ninth house can create delays, but also karmas regarding traveling um, and documentations. Okay, like passports and stuff. It can create stuff to do with education, like academic education. For example, Saturn in the ninth house might be a person that you meet when you travel, and um, then you have to tend to, or then you take on a degree, or then you have tend to your passport, or tend to your papers. Okay. Um, Saturn might also be um, stuff that happen. Okay, that like for example, natal Saturn in the ninth house can bring a delay in having an academic degree, but it would mean that there would be a very important karmic mission in academia. For example, for me it was the Me Too, my research, my essays, and all the things that I was targeted for because I was not going with enslaving humanity, and Saturn rules slavery. So tending to abolishing slavery can be a karma that I have on an international level to fulfill whenever my ninth house is being accentuated. Um, it can even mean, for example, student exchange I couldn't do because the Department of Linguistics in my school was all about Chomsky, and the courses were not compatible with like semiotics and then I would discover that that was a hidden blessing because I definitely wasn't ready to the ritual abuse and trafficking that happens in academia worldwide. So, and this is exactly somebody's Saturn into one's ninth house can bring about both the delays and the karmic mission. Um, so that can be a religion, that can be an academic degree, that can be traveling. Um, yes, is considered house of God. So that can be, for example, think about a secular person. Like I'm, for example, a relatively secular person. I did not see that like the Sanhedrin and the Talmud have basically um, book rules on how to traffic and rape children. Like, okay, that explains some anti-Semitism. And the Saturn is ruling over Neptune. My Neptune square was here in Michael Francese talking about the Jewish mafia and basically the contribution of the Jewish mafia to the mafia is an ex-mob boss. And I was like, oh, so people hated Judaism also because they were like mafiosi. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. They think the person is a Jew, so they think a person is a mafiosi, and that can spark, if mafia was trafficking people and was doing ritual, let's say they have to even, let's say they're killing their own. Okay, let's say somebody's living in a house or living in a place and they have to do a certain targeting ritual on that person, it would affect also the people in the environment, and then people would suffer ritual abuse because or targeting because of the mafia. And then it was like, okay, they don't just take that person and that's between them, but it also affects people around, and that can cause anti-Semitism. So this is how a Saturn, and I have Neptune in Saturn sign, so when that Saturn was activated, basically my ninth house Saturn was activated, and I understood something that as a secular person, like I would never tend to, because like people want to be Jews, fine. People want to be Christian, fine. People want to be atheists. Like that would not even be on my radar. Saturn in the 10th house. So actually, Saturn in the 10th house can bring a maturation, reality check, manifestation, delays, and incarnation of our goals and dreams in regards to career. Um, but also being an authority figure, being even relationships with parental figures and bosses, um, and being a parent. So this can, yes, for example, I have basically the person that was inspiring um, me to learn how essential oils and all the stuff I learned are blending into astrological talismans that are more accessible to make. And that was Caitlin Koppock. She has Saturn in my 10th house. And the things that she goes through with her business are both giving like trajectories to a lot of patterns in my own career, but also like, hey, she's doing this talisman business, and then she has a tema mundi, and she happened to tap into like MK Ultra, CIA, stuff like that. So her business would be targeted, and I would see what it actually means to own a business that is a global business and combines astrology with like essential oils and stuff and medical properties. And I just like observe and see, okay, that's way more megalithic than I had predicted, probably than Caitlin had predicted as well. But that would definitely be a Saturn in my 10th house, and there would even be an interference from my ex-boss from academia, trying to distort the rituals, not in any of our favor. Um, and that would, a lot of the times, the psychic attacks that would be against Caitlin, I would experience them, or I would experience a psychic attack, and she would talk about something that was like, okay, I know exactly what was done to her, exactly what was done to me. She also have Rahu Moon onto my ascendant, but this is where, um, also I remember at the time where she had people plagiarizing her ideas, so she did a lot of magic to have her name said, and I just noticed myself, because I have a 10th house, okay, there. Then I just, and suddenly something takes time, so so it was like, that would be like sometimes a person getting maybe even more attention than they wished, because they persistently did those those magical manifestations to have them credited whenever they're. And notice how this name, um, how the name still comes up, and this is where Saturn would create the appropriate delays, because to be, let's say, another talisman business, not only takes the time like to perfect and to make sure that something works and so on and so forth, or to run a business. This is where I would be expected to work with MK often, which to begin with I turned to astrology because I didn't want to do. And I bring Saturn to her first house, so that is. So if there's anything off there, we're gonna know. and Saturn is Saturn, like it's gonna take its time, and it's going to bring in whatever trajectory needs to be corrected. Saturn can also be maturation regarding one's image, and indeed, when she had that formal love talisman, I received stuff about like how I'm being perceived and all stuff and all that, and all those things that I had to like surrender, because I have like Neptune, midheaven, and Uranus in the 10th house. um, but that can bring an awareness. Okay, for example, even talking about those placements is kind of like addressing the fact that I have such a 10th house as I have. So this is a maturation regarding one's image, how they're being perceived, how they present themselves publicly. Um, okay. Um, more to do with that parenting, being a parent, relationship with parents, relationship with bosses. Um, and Saturn, and again, with Saturn, it's not about doing something out of necessity. It's about doing the right thing. So, for example, knowing that I'm not the type of person who could work in a corporation or could have a boss above them is very important. Because, for example, when I state that in advance, then people know, okay, that's me, or whether they accept it or don't accept it. This is something that can create a lot of freedom. Okay, so that limitation of, hey, I am not a person that can have a boss unless the boss is willing to be rebelled against. And that can be very liberating, but it is, that is um, quite challenging as well. And that limitation, Saturn, when I accept that, and when whoever would be even thinking to be an authority above me accept accept that, then there is a lot of freedom for both of us because we accept that Saturn limitation. Um, Saturn in the 11th house. So Saturn in the 11th house brings reality checks to goals and dreams. For example, I cannot say, like, I know if the chart that I got is correct, um, and I have reason to believe that it is. When I was doing water expands upon cooling, the first time I named that project was on an Instagram page of someone um, who, let's just say, had an affiliation to true crime, and satire is not now. It's not. And so we have Saturn Neptune in Capricorn. Um, but this was a big reality check on water expands upon cooling, because there were a lot of things about the industry of true crime that I had no idea of, to say the least. And so, um, and that person was kind of like placing that. At first, I thought it was just restriction, but then I was like, okay, I see. And then I did the second season of Water Expanse upon cooling, addressing those very issues. So, um, but this is a reality checks regarding our goals and dreams, and also incarnation of our goals and dreams. Okay, it can bring delays, but don't be mistaken. Saturn doesn't bring delay to stop one doing from something unless they're really not supposed to do that. Saturn brings not only the delay, but also the pflicht, okay, the must do, okay, which means that let's say water expands upon cooling. It wouldn't just bring the delays; it will also bring um, the incarnation of tending to that. Like, if I'm meant to do that, there would be no getting away without actually broadcasting water expands upon cooling for that record. Okay. Um, Saturn can bring delays and incarnations also when it comes to allies and enemies. This is where I discovered that my yes, that it can be the case that my lot of nemesis is next to my Jupiter or next to my Rahu, which is no lesser challenge. Um, but this is where um, we would have to set boundaries when it comes to, let's say, our life. Okay, because let's say we have a golden dream, or the place we are public figures. Saturn can create delay in being a public figure, but also can incarnate being a public figure. Um, Saturn, and this is both for the Saturn person, wherever that falls in their chart, and for the 11th house person. So let's say the Saturn person effed around and found out, it's going to bring both the effed around trajectory, but it's definitely going to bring the find out trajectory. where they could thought they could pull something off that they do, and then they fell on somebody's 11th house, and they get publicly exposed for doing that, or that or that the person addresses that, and everybody around them that were gathering up the popcorn, are now having a different, different type of mockery ritual, and the person in the 11th house might not even know about that. Um, okay, because um, but it can also bring correction to the 11th house and to the Saturn person as well. Um, Saturn in the 11th house can definitely expose anything that goes on, like funding projects or mass social media. Okay, third house is social media, but also 11th house, and again, it's another one of those public houses. So it can get a person both to have a delay in being a public figure, or to have a karma to their being a public figure, or it can be a person becoming more mature as a public figure. Saturn in someone's 12th house, so that can be a house that is protective from enemies, but also that person might expose a reality. Like if that person that's coming to someone's 12th house is going to like place curses there or whatnot, then 12th house, the person that was in relationship or in contact with them will usually only find it out years after they separated, and it usually works in a way that the one placing the curses was building on the long run, and just when they were thinking to get rid of the person and just hijack the blessing, um, if in the cases where that was the case, not yes, then what will happen is that that separation would expose the 12th house, because the 12th house makes itself evident in the astral and in the dream state when people are not in physical contact with one another. The good thing about it, it can be somebody's defense from hidden enemies, which also can play out. Okay, it can be, and it can be both. Okay, um, so that is where, for example, I had a situation of double whammy with Saturn in the 12th house, and that is where there would be both protection from hidden enemies, but also very important karma. They will hold the person accountable, okay, for what they did. Um, okay, if they did something in the astral, Saturn rules debt, okay, and if they try to manufacture a debt, they might find themselves in one, because if they try to create a situation to enslave, let's say, me, then or try to um, create certain confusion or something like that, then they would find themselves basically having to deal with a Saturn cycle of what they like. Okay, so Saturn, again, if it is protection from hidden enemies, then that can be a very remediating effect on someone's chart. But if it is, if a person is doing something wrong in somebody's 12th house, let's just put it that way, they are putting themselves through a Saturn cycle of karma. It's relating to everyone, but the 12th house is particularly challenging, because let's say somebody did somebody wrong, and that somebody is seeing that, so that person can hold that person accountable immediately, and that doesn't catch karma. Okay, let's say somebody, I don't know, somebody tried to curse me, and then I wake up, I put the curse back to sender. They see an immediate effect, and then they understand they're being immediately held accountable, and Saturn will just be the time spent until they understand they have to take a course of action that honors my body, my sovereignty in spirit and in matter. But what if a person does wrong things and doesn't get karma? Okay, at first it looks like they don't get karma. They have, let's say, a friend or a relative or whatnot, and they doing those dark trajectories, and that other person wouldn't think that their best friend that stood up for them during the Me Too time is doing something behind their backs to try to that would result in trying to traffic them. Um, then they seem to be fucking around and not finding out until even years after the separation, a person would begin to set the boundaries to something that happened in the past. And now they got themselves mixed up in crimes against humanity on a global scale, preventing a person from serving their due diligence. Um, okay, and now to what level are they guilty? In how much in how involved they are, I wouldn't know. But those who will have to do the due diligence will have to also do the due diligence to find out, and they got their name mixed up with that. um, which in whichever way they got to that point, that's quite some. That's quite some. And it's funny because a couple of days before that, before I had to leave, I said to the person, if somebody works against me or something like that, usually like it harms me, but also I do not wish my enemies to be my enemies. And I wasn't necessarily addressing him like I was seeing him as my best friend. Um, it was just like sharing with him a trajectory that I noticed about my life because it was my Saturn maturation in the 12th house. And I just noticed how everybody that thought that they could get around or get away with harming me, it was not, and not in a sense of like personal against me. It's just like it's those things that they do to people, and I'm people. So, so they thought that they could get away with that, and then just by me going about my life, that would unravel a megalithic karma in theirs. Um, and I had not even, only now that I speak, I'm like, that person got themselves mixed up with some stuff. And it was only their first Saturn return. Like, that is really. Um, and for me, I was in a shelter in Netherlands, just thinking about it. Like, oh my God, the person that was younger than me, that had his Saturn return when I had my Saturn maturation, they were they were abusive towards me during their Saturn return. Like, oh my God, this is such a bad idea. Like, I really hope for them that they're gonna fix that because it's Saturn. Because like they start a Saturn cycle doing such things to a certain to a person, like they better not, is what I'm saying. Um, and all I could think about was like, oh my God, that's like really bad for this person to try to do those things to a person, to try to enslave a person, to try to bring a person on purpose to be in debt, to try to do things that would end up in attempting to traffic a person. That To try to harm somebody's sanity, to try to prevent a person from healing from medical issues. That is something that is okay. So this is Saturn in the 12th house. Um, Whereas, as for me, like I was also the double whammy, so another case of Saturn in the 12th house. For me, Saturn is the ninth house, so I could show the certain trajectories or the certain, how should I say that? There's certain things that are affecting the sanity of a person. Okay, so let's say a person is very sensitive, energetic.